Hey, yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Dead Draw Gaming YouTube channel. This is SmartTCG, and today I'm going to be going over my updated Surging Sparks tier list. This is going to be the last Surging Sparks tier list I most likely do on the channel until the brand new set Prismatic Evolutions comes out, to where things will actually change quite a bit. I'm going to be trying to do at least 1 to 2 tier lists per month. So if you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if there's any other types of Pokemon TCG content that you would like to see, make sure to leave that in the comments. But with that being said, let's hop right into it. We got Birmingham regionals, Rio de Janeiro regionals, and also San Antonio regionals that are quickly approaching, which still will have the Surging Sparks format. So we're going to be hopping right into it here. So let's start off with some of the big decks, some of the decks that many of you are wondering where I am going to rate. And we're going to start off here with Gardevoir. Gardevoir has seen a huge resurgence after the most recent Perth Regional Championships. Quito was able to take it down. And then the week later at Toronto Regional Championships, there were multiple very strong players like Henry Chow, Michael Davidson, and more that were able to see quite a bit of success. Gardevoir is a very, very strong deck right now. Most importantly, the slow version is the one that's been seeing the most play. It seems like people have kind of gone away from Secret Box Rare Candy and instead are playing the slow version with things like Unfair Stamp, Moonlit Hill, as well, Triple Dark Energy. Really trying to focus around attacking with Gardevoir EX, it seems like, and the deck is really good right now. Very, very good. It does well against a lot of the turbo decks that are trying to beat Regidrago, and takes a very, very close Regidrago matchup. So I think that this is going to be at the top of tier A. This deck is the best it has been in quite some time, and I definitely expect it to do well moving forward. Next up here, we got Regidrago. Regidrago is, in my opinion, the strongest deck in the standard format. We're going to put it right up at tier S right now. There are some more decks that are trying to compete against it. For example, Gardevoir is super, super good right now, kind of moving its way up. It does have some competition against the turbo decks as well, but it has a chance versus everything. I think that's what really makes it so powerful, is it can really beat any deck in the standard format. So I think Regidrago is the slam dunk S tier deck in the format, but it's getting a little bit more competition as decks like Gardevoir start to see more success recently. Next up here, we got Charizard Pidgeot. Charizard Pidgeot has been performing decently at tournaments, hasn't been necessarily performing exceptionally well recently, but I still think it is a tier A deck. Going to be more towards the middle to bottom portion, I think, at the moment, but still a decent deck. The big problem right now, though, is the Regidrago matchup. The Regidrago matchup is quite difficult for this deck. However, you do take a decent Gardevoir matchup. You do well against a lot of the turbo decks that are trying to beat Regidrago, so you do kind of cover those matchups. However, the big problem matchup that I haven't been able to fully figure out yet is the Regidrago matchup. Yes, you could potentially, if you're able to knock out Cleffa, go knock out Cleffa, knock out Teal Mask, and then Briar for game, doing that 1-2-3 prize trade, or potentially try and make a comeback with that Radzard plus Define Span and an Unfair Stamp. However, it's easier said than done. So yeah, at the moment Zard's still very, very good, but I think is a little bit weaker than some of these other decks. Next up, we got Archlodon. This is a deck that's been getting quite a bit of talk, as it most recently won one of the Champions Leagues in Japan with like 5,000 players. I think the deck is good. I think it is very, very well positioned right now. It takes a very solid Regidrago matchup, which is important. It takes about a 60-40 Regidrago matchup. Its Charizard matchup is iffy, and its Gardevoir matchup is close if you play Jamming Tower, but still not great. But taking a good matchup against Regidrago is very important. Your matchups against a lot of the turbo decks are also totally fine, because you can go from an all one prize board state into knocking out 2 prizers, which is really good. And yeah, the deck does well against things like Cloth, does pretty well against Dragapult decks as well, because you have so much healing. I think it's a good deck. I think it's, relatively, simple. So it's, I think, relatively consistent. You don't need a whole lot to really get going. And yeah, I think it's pretty good. Next up here, we got Lugia. I think Lugia is very underrated right now. It has a decent matchup against Drago, Gardevoir, and Charizard. Most importantly, has a pretty good matchup against Regidrago. Has an incredibly good matchup against Regidrago if it sets up, if they aren't playing Temple of Sinnoh, which plenty of Regidrago lists are cutting, which is really important. And yeah, Lugia is a really good deck right now. I would say its biggest weakness is itself at the moment. It just sometimes isn't able to get set up, and that's the thing that's holding it back. So I think Lugia is going to be kind of in the middle of tier A. I might actually just put it above Charizard right now. It might be in a better spot than Charizard. Yeah, I think Lugia is pretty underrated. I think it's a good deck right now. It would be probably the strongest deck in the format if you could guarantee turn 2 double Archeops every single game, but you can't do that, which is the problem, and it kind of holds itself back. So yep, Lugia, solid tier A deck. I think one of the top 5 decks in the format for sure right now. Next up, we got Raging Bolt. I think Raging Bolt is still quite good. Top of tier B, my preferred turbo deck of choice right now. I think it's relatively consistent. It's a turbo deck that you feel fine going first with as well, because you have things like Bravery Charm, so you can make your Bolt have, almost 300 HP, which is really good. Being able to hit pretty much unlimited damage as well, taking a slightly favored, I think about 55-45 favored matchup into Regidrago, having a shot versus things like Charizard, Lugia is close. Your Archlodon matchup, in my opinion, is close as well. The big thing holding it back, in my opinion, is the Gardevoir matchup. The Gardevoir matchup just is not great. You kind of have to hope they stumble, which if they don't, you can run into some problems. But I think Bolt is relatively decent right now. Definitely, I think a little bit better than people give it credit for. So yeah, Bolt, top of tier B, very solid deck. Next up, we got let's go over Ancient Box. This is a deck that has kind of came back a little bit recently with the addition of Brilliant Blunder. I think it's a solid deck. I think the deck is pretty good right now. It has an okay Regidrago matchup. Its matchups against things like, all the turbo decks are good. It takes about 50-50 matchup into Gardevoir, maybe slightly in favor just because they have Unfair Stamp and they can, trap things with, Scream's Tail and then snipe the bench, which can kind of be an issue. But I still think it's pretty decent. I think it's a strong deck overall. It runs into some consistency issues, especially at the beginning of the game. It can feel kind of clunky, but when it gets going, it is pretty good. Next up here, we got Ceruledge. Just going to put it in tier C right now. It's a decent deck right now, but I feel like the other turbo decks are just better, along with Goldango as well. I think Goldango's a top of C tier deck, but just kind of does what Ceruledge does, but a little bit better, I feel like, and also having a built-in draw engine with, Goldango is quite nice. Next up, we got Marion. Maridon's still a tier B deck, I think. It is solid. I think Raging Bolt's a little bit better right now. But yeah, I think that Maridon's decent. It can feel a little bit chaotic and inconsistent at times, just because you are relying on the generators to hit, and in some situations they don't hit, and your deck can feel very, very bad. So that's, one of the problems with the deck, but I still think it's a solid deck overall. It does take a decent Regidrago matchup. Its Gardevoir matchup is okay. Its Lugia matchup is decent. Its Charizard matchup is an issue, though. Its Charizard matchup is not great. Which can, kind of hold the deck back. I would say also its Archlodon matchup probably isn't amazing as well either, just because they're able to one-shot a lot of, your attackers, and then you struggle to hit 300 back, or, and they can keep their bench relatively limited. So you do, I guess, run into some problems, like occasionally versus that deck. But yeah, overall, I think that Maridon is a pretty solid deck overall. Not necessarily amazing in any way, just a decent meta deck at the moment. Next up, we got Lost Zone Toolbox. Too much Regidrago, too much Charizard right now, I think, for Lost Zone, unfortunately. But it's still a cool deck. Would not be surprised to see some success moving forward. But its matchup against Regidrago is just so hard. It does take a decent Gardevoir matchup right now, which it does have going for it. Just because they don't play Klefki and Fluttermane, or I guess a lot of lists don't play Klefki and Fluttermane. They just play Klefki, which is a lot more, easier to deal with if they don't have the Fluttermane as well to attack. So there, I guess, is that going for it. But yeah, it's, I would say, a relatively average deck right now. Cloth, solid B tier deck, strong deck overall, has chances versus most things, except the Gardevoir matchup is just bad. It's not good. Your Charizard matchup as well is pretty mediocre. Your Archlodon matchup is pretty mediocre as well. But your Regidrago matchup is decent. Your Lugia matchup is decent. Your Turbo matchups are all good for the most part, except Maridon is actually kind of losable just because they can go 2/2/2 so quickly. But I would say your Turbo matchups for the most part are pretty decent. So yeah, it's a solid deck for sure. Next up here, we got Turbo Roaring Moon. This is the other Turbo deck right now. The last one pretty much on this list. It's solid. I think it's a decent deck right now. I've been testing it out. It has kind of impressed me. Having access to Judge is one of the unique things that this deck has that the other Turbo decks doesn't. Raging Bolt really needs to Sadas, early in the game. It does play Iona, which can be good late game, but Maridon's pretty much just plays like Arven and just Boss's Orders for the most part. But Turbo Roaring Moon has that, unique ability to play Judge because it can just go attach for turn and then go double Dark Patch, and then, you have a fully powered up, really powerful attacker, so you can hand disrupt them. So that's one of the nice things about Moon, is that you can, beat opponents by, loading up a Moon, judging them turn one, taking a big one-shot knockout, and then they just don't have any response. So that is something that the deck has going for it, which is really, really nice. Next up here, we got Dragapult Iron Thorns. Dragapult Iron Thorns, in my opinion, is a solid B tier deck. Thorns, solid card overall. Just being able to, get up the Dragapults, consistently, just kind of sitting behind Thorns, using the TM Evo to go on the Dragaloaks. You draw a bunch of cards, and you can start attacking with the Iron Thorns to move energies over. Your matchup against Regidrago isn't amazing. It's close. Your matchup against Gardevoir isn't amazing. It's close. Your matchup against Charizard is favored. Your matchup against Lugia is pretty favored as long as you start Iron Thorns. So it has that, going for you. Your Turbo matchups are relatively close as well. You can slow them down, which is really, really important with the Iron Thorns. But yeah, it's just a solid deck in general. I definitely think it's going to show up. There will be some that do well. Does it have enough to win a tournament? I'm not 100% sure. Does it have enough to make the second day? Maybe get some top 32 or 64 placements for sure. Next up, we got Snorlax here. Snorlax, in my opinion, is a solid B tier deck. Probably more towards the top at the moment right now. I don't think the deck is actually that bad. You take a decent Regidrago matchup. You take a decent Charizard matchup, which is really good. Your Gardevoir matchup is close as well. A lot of Snorlax kind of, I guess, depends on how, lucky you get off Fortune Sisters and Erie, and also how well the opponent knows how to play against it. Snorlax is able to take advantage of people who just don't necessarily know how to play against it, but yeah, if they know how to play against it and they have the tech cards, it can definitely be pretty rough at times. So that's kind of one of the problems overall. And your Lugia matchup, if Lugia does start to see some more play, isn't that good. And lastly here, we have the Turtle. I think Turtles is a solid B tier deck right now. I think it's a little bit better than it used to be, as it does take a, in my opinion, favored, Gardevoir matchup. Its Archon matchup is pretty decent. Its Drago matchup is close, but Charizard does cause some problems for it. The Lugia matchup, if they set up correctly, and know how to limit their board from 2 prize liabilities, can also be difficult. So it's I think a solid deck right now. I think it's a deck that I'm going to test out a little bit more. But at the moment, I think it's kind of in the middle of tier 2. Maybe we'll put actually a little bit higher here. I think it's probably a little bit better than Snorlax. Yeah, I think it's a solid deck for sure. I definitely think it's more underrated than it is. I feel like overrated. It kind of just fell off. It was a deck that saw success and then kind of just disappeared. So I think it's a deck that will definitely show up and see some more success moving forward. I also wanted to mention one other deck that's not on here, Pidgeot Control. I think Pidgeot Control is just a solid B tier deck. I think Snorlax is a little bit better, as Snorlax has a better time versus Regidrago from my experience, and also Gardevoir too. So I think that Pidgeot is a solid B tier deck. But anyways, that is going to do it today for the video. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. We'll be having some podcasts and stuff like that coming out soon, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But this is Gabriel Smart from the Dead Draw Gaming team. I'll speak with you guys again soon. Peace out.